This live, Vicky.
Thank you, non-live, Chair.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2nd of February meeting of the Hub Committee. I'd just like to remind everybody the usual processes and procedures apply. So if you'd like to ask a question or comment, either raise your hand or leave an appropriate comment in the text box. As usual, if we could make sure there are no separate debates going on in the text box, that would be extremely helpful. The meeting is being broadcast live, as we know. Are there any apologies for absence? Janice, have you heard of anything?
No, Chair.
But we are absent Councillor Moody at the moment. We'll hope that he manages to join us. OK. Declarations of interest. Members are invited to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Are there any declarations of interest from members? Nothing coming up, so I take that as a no. Item 3. Items requiring urgent attention. I've not been notified of any. Janice, have we got anything that needs to come forward?
Not that I'm aware of, Chair.
Thank you, Janice. Confirmation of minutes. The minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. If we could just go through those for accuracy, I would be very grateful. So is there anything on page 1 of those minutes? Page 2. And page 3. In which case I'm very happy to take those as being an accurate record of the meeting, and we'll sign those in due course. Thank you. Item 5, public questions. I've not received any questions. Is there anything that's come forward from the public, Janice?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, Hub Forward Plan. You've been circulated a copy of the forward plan. Obviously, this brings forward the various strands of work that we are all working with and allocates when those are going to be looked at by Hub. Does anybody have any comments about the forward plan? Anything that's inaccurate, incorrect, or needs any discussion at this point? I'm not getting it. Oh, I have one hand that's come up. Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Chair. It's just really to request that under environment that we can add in, please, the discussion of the Public Spaces Protection Order, because that will be coming towards Hub on the 16th of March, please.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. That's clearly an excellent suggestion. So we will make sure that gets included in the forward plan. If there are no other comments or observations, I will take that as being an acceptance of the forward plan and the accuracy of that information. We then come to item 7 on the agenda, the revenue budget proposals for 2021-2022. You have in front of you, members, a very comprehensive paper setting out the budget proposals for next year. As usual, my thanks to Mrs. Buckle and her excellent team in pulling all this together, and also those various members who've been involved in bringing this report and the contents of this report to you along the way. I present this report against a backdrop that we all know and understand, a reduction in core funding such that we now receive no revenue support grant, and also the COVID emergency, which has caused such difficulties this year. On the plus side, very pleased to note that we received a £70,000 lower tier services grant that has enabled us to present the balanced budget that is now in front of you. The budget has been through the normal process. There's been a number of workshops. The Financial Stability Group has looked at it on a number of occasions, and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has passed their rule over it as well. I'm really pleased to say that we are able to recommend to Council, if we take this forward today, a balanced budget. You'll note that the budget includes an increase of £5 to a Band D property. This is 2.11%, or around about 10 pence per week. It records a total spend of some 7.3 million, including cost pressures of 434,000 and savings of 344,000. Built into the budget are contributions to earmarked reserves of 42,500, but use of 193,000 of new homes bonus to fund the budget. Also included with the papers is a business case for providing additional funding to the Community Safety Partnership as requested by some members during the budget setting process, and recognising the difficulties being experienced by many young people in our society at the moment. I'd appreciate members' thoughts and advice on that document in particular. There's also a recommendation to transfer 281,500 of COVID funding to a COVID earmarked reserve to protect against future losses in the forthcoming year. Listed within the appendices are changes to fees and charges that are set out in section 7. It's disappointing to note that although core spending power has increased by 2.6%, this mainly comes from council tax increases, and that rural district councils remain the poor relations when compared to other authorities of varying types, even though, arguably, with our knowledge of our local areas and our agility to react, we could be best placed to have immediate effects and benefits during the recovery phase. We continue to lobby on this point, including a joint letter from Devon districts to the Treasury, which we are sponsoring. The paper is in front of you, members. We've been right through this process, so we should be well versed in it. I would gladly accept any questions that members may have at this stage before we go into debate. So members, any questions? Councillor Mott.
Apologies, Chair. I was expecting you to go to Councillor Edmonds first. Can I ask, please, it's in regard to the report from the Community Partnership. I note that there is a bid in there from the Tavistock Youth Cafe and from Space. Can I ask if any other groups were approached to come up with ideas or to offer bids on any possible spending or support? I noticed that Opera, for example, have done a lot of good work in Tavistock as well as Oakhampton and the surrounding villages, and seem to have a wider net than what I've seen of the Tavistock Youth Cafe. So I'm just curious to know whether other groups have been approached with possible support for this.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. Mr. Hawke may be able to enlighten us, give us a bit more information. My understanding is this came from a proposal in a budget workshop that the Community Safety Partnership was recognised as doing some amazing work in this area, and that there was a need, and they were asked to put together a business case to support an additional grant. Mr. Hawke, is that the case, or were there any other organisations that were invited to tender at all?
No, that's the case, Leader. At this point in time, my understanding is that it's just those two groups that have had discussions around the support that could be provided. Thank you.
That's something I'd be very interested in member feedback on. So thank you for raising that, Councillor Mott. Councillor Edmonds, I apologise for not coming to you sooner. It was unclear on my list who'd popped up first.
Thank you, Chair. That's not a problem. Always good to hear from Councillor Mott. Yeah, look, a bit of a preamble here before I eventually get to my question, but it is around the business case for the CSP, and you've invited us to comment. You know, I'm happy to provide support for the youth of the borough, and of course the good work of the CSP. As we know, we already support the CSB with the provision of staff resource, and I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity to broaden our support here, not just for young members of our community who have no doubt suffered as a result of the lockdowns, but across all age groups, some of whom will also have experienced probably isolation and inactivity. So I'm thinking about our existing community and sports groups who do great work in their communities, respective communities, and they're ideally placed to reach out to those people who need encouragement to engage with their local community. And many of these groups have been dormant over the past year and will have no doubt suffered financially as their income streams have fallen away. So to make this into a question, if we are to commit, if members decide to commit a sum of 21,000 to support youth around the borough, could this be split between the CSB project, say 15,000, and by increasing the proposed budget contribution to the community project fund for next year from 15,000 to 21,000, with the intention of inviting sports clubs and community-based groups to apply for funding, with the emphasis on attracting new members to their groups and clubs, with particular emphasis on the younger members of our communities. Therefore, hopefully achieving perhaps a much wider spread of support rather than just focusing on the CSB project, which I've no doubt would be very relevant. But I'm very keen that this support reaches all areas of the borough, including the most rural, and perhaps this is one way of reaching out to everyone, giving everyone the opportunity to benefit from any support that we're able to provide. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. I think the answer to your question is probably yes, it could. I think that would be very interesting for us to get into when the debate opens as to whether members would like to restructure the proposal a little bit and gather more information and do something a little bit different with it. But I think the answer to your question is yes. Mr. Hawke, do you have any comment on that, or should we, would that wait until the debate, would you go into debate?
I think that can wait until debate, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds, does that answer your question and tee you up for later, maybe?
Yes, indeed. Thank you for considering that.
Okay. Are there any other questions, members? In which case, I'd like to propose, if I may, the recommendations in the report. They are shown on page, well, over 2 pages. If I can get to them, page 9 and page 10 of the report. So recommendations from recommendation 1 in Roman numerals to recommendation 15. So I would like to propose those recommendations as they stand. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second those, Chair. I'm happy to second those, Chair. However, can I suggest, bearing in mind that there's obviously going to be a bit of a conversation around point 6, which is to consider the business case for the additional funding for the Community Safety Partnership, that we do that one as a separate one, and with the others all going on block. Okay,
that's I think that's a good proposal, Councillor Mott. So the proposal is for the items shown on pages 9 and 10, excluding at the moment item 6. And could I have a seconder for that? And Janice, would we then take a vote on those items before moving on to debate on item 6 in particular?
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay. Councillor Edmonds, do you have a further point to make?
In debate, Leader, or?
Yes, in debate.
Well, in support of my question, you know, I just think this broader type of approach will help to widen the benefits of any financial support to the more rural areas of the borough. We've seen ourselves the tremendous community response to COVID. is this not a further opportunity to build on that enriched community spirit and help enable communities to rebuild and reach out to all who need support? And possibly we could look towards the 5th tranche of government COVID support, which I believe is due to be received in April, perhaps as a source of this funding to cover both the CSP project and an increased contribution to the community support fund. So I would be happy to make a proposal along those lines, certainly to support the CSP and the fine work that we know they do, but also to perhaps look at this opportunity to maybe go further if members think there is some merit in that. My intention would be, as I think I said, that we could perhaps publicise, promote this fund with very much the emphasis on inviting groups and sports clubs who do fantastic work to apply for some funding, with very much the emphasis on engaging with new members. And we all know the benefit of community groups, sports groups. It's certainly been, certainly my village life upbringing was certainly based around that. And it gets people involved, it keeps them together. There's a lot of support, friendship, camaraderie, and so on. Disciplines of life, winning and losing, etc., etc. So that's why I bring this forward as a suggestion, and I'd be very interested to hear other members' points of view on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. I think that's really useful. The proposal we have on the table at the moment is excluding that point at the moment. So we'll come back to that. So hold those thoughts, everybody. I think that's really helpful. I've got 2 more hands up. Councillor Cheadle and Leach, are your questions, is your debate about what's on the table, or is it in relation to the community service partnership funding?
I wanted to make 2 comments, one about each.
Okay. Would you like to give us your one about the proposals that are on the table?
Sure. It was simply to say that it's a brilliant report, and many thanks to Lisa and her team for doing it. But to the sort of lay member of the public, it's a bewildering array of figures sort of in and out of the budget, which I don't think we could expect people to fully sort of understand. So I would appeal to our comms department perhaps to set out in very sort of easy to understand terms a communication on the result of today's discussion, or maybe on result of the council approving this eventually, so that the man in the street sort of understands that we're not just about putting up council tax, we're all about maintaining services and in some cases improving them.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. I think that's really helpful, and of course our recommendation at the moment is to send this report through to council for approval. That might be the right time to come out with some communication, so I really appreciate that input. Councillor Leach.
Yes, my concern is with the community safety partnership in as much as 2 things. One is if we actually split the costs. We haven't had the chance to ask the community safety partnership what they wouldn't be able to do, or whether the whole scheme falls because they don't get the full amount of money. That's my concern there. Equally, if they split it into some of the categories they've already got, we could find that money will only be spent at one part of West Devon, whereas I would like to see it spread right across West Devon. But I'm actually for funding it.
Thank you, Councillor Leach. We'll expand the debate about the community service partnership proposal in a moment. can members keep their comments right now to what is on the table so we can get these done and dusted? Are there any other comments regarding the recommendations excluding the community service partnership recommendation? I'm guessing Councillor Cheadle and Councillor Leach have got their hands up in readiness for the next debate.
Yes. Mine should be down now.
In which case, members, I think we'll go to a vote on those. So this is all the recommendations excluding that relation to the community service partnership proposal. And Janice will need a recorded vote for this, if that's okay.
Thank you, Leader. So we are, I'm going to take your vote now, please, on item 7, excluding option 6 for the moment. Councillor Cheadle.
For the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jory.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Leach.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Moody.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mort.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Samuel.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Sellis.
For.
Thank you. And therefore, Leader, that is carried unanimously, excluding option 6 for the moment.
Thank you, everybody. So with regards to option 6, I'd like to put that propose that recommendation. The recommendation being to consider the business case for additional funding for the community safety partnership as per section 5.2 and appendix F. Could I have a seconder for that, and we can then debate that item in particular?
Happy to second that.
Thank you. So we've heard some evidence already, members, of some different thinking, but also a great deal of support coming forward for the community service partnership proposal. I think the way it was set out, if I can just set the scene here, is that the proposal was requested and does need to be evidence-led. And the proposal does set out that one of the first activities should be to gather that evidence. It goes on to make recommendations about the number of sessions, number of children it would be able to work with, etc., etc. That's possibly a bit premature if we haven't gathered the evidence. That would be one thought I'd like to put forward. My feeling is we need to think about this in a broader sense. There could be other things we might like to do, including Councillor Edmonds' suggestions. So perhaps a proposal that could be put forward is that we request officers to carry out further work with the Community Safety Partnership and with other key agencies on their proposal and consider their intelligence before agreeing to the full funding. I think in saying that, we recognise completely the need to ensure that mental health and well-being of residents is supported and that we'll continue to face the challenges of COVID-19 for some time. So with that in mind, I'd welcome thoughts of other members, but perhaps we can construct a recommendation that is something along those lines, that we ask officers to do a bit more research and come back with some firm proposals. But I'm also really keen that we get those firm proposals quickly, because it's important that we get something in place and we do something, because there's very real need out there. Can I come to Councillor Moody?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I concur with your thoughts that the first thing that came to my mind, whilst I completely appreciate Councillor Edmonds' suggestion, I think it's a good suggestion. We really can't make a decision unless we've got full information. We did ask the CSP, the Community Safety Partnership, to supply us with a business case, which they have done, but we need to see how any alterations to the funding will affect their work, and also we need further information about the community sports fund as well. But I think we should investigate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moody. Councillor Cheadle. You're on mute, Councillor Cheadle.
First of all, I agree with your proposal about seeking a bit more information, but also urgency is, or speed is of the essence here. We don't want this sort of dragged out into a long and protracted debate about the rights and wrongs. A relatively simple way of resolving it is what we need. But I'd like just to turn for a second to Councillor Edmonds' proposal about the community fund. I think it's a very good idea. The community fund is partially spent, as far as I'm aware. Some councillors have used their allocation, others have yet to do so. And I think it would be appropriate if we could nudge councillors who haven't used their funds to do so in a sort of COVID positive way, if I could put it that way. I mean, my own fund, I was sort of saving up for a particular project, but I can't honestly say that that project is as important as the sort of ideas that Chris was proposing. So I'm absolutely happy to sort of recast my ideas on what I might have done with my fund in order to help, particularly as he was suggesting, youth groups and the like. So I think it requires not only a sort of decision that it's a good idea, but a little bit of, well, how are we actually going to do it thought as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Leader. I have some concerns at Councillor Edmonds' suggestion, actually. I can understand where he's coming from, but I think the Community Safety Partnership do a huge amount of work, which a lot of members are unaware of. And I think this is a case whereby, because members do not attend the meetings of when they're invited of the presentations that are done by the Community Safety Partnership, it's a great shame, because I can't see how you can ask for a business case to be presented on some of the aspects of the work they do. And there's been a tremendous amount of work over the last 12, 18 months, 2 years, involving county lines, the county line situation that was building up in Devon. And I think, to remove this money from what has been put forward for their allocation is a very negative stance. And I think the money that Councillor Edmonds has asked for sport support should come from somewhere else. I don't think it could come from this money that has been identified for the Community Safety Partnership. So I could not support that recommendation. I support your recommendation, Leader, that we request officers to undertake further research, but there must be a time limit on it. We cannot let this drag out. And as Councillor Cheadle said, it's something that needs to be dealt with very quickly. So I have great concerns about reducing the money that's been identified for the Community Safety Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. I think what we're suggesting at the moment would be a data-led proposal, and of course implicit within that is that the same amount of money may still be made available to the Community Service Partnership. I think we have to go with that data and then see what we can do. So I'd say everything's on the table at the moment. I wouldn't want to take anything off.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Musgrave.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. I will be very brief. And if I'm totally honest, I feel fairly unprepared for what I should be leading on. I know I initially instigated this request that we should consider additional funding for the CSP. All I would say is that I've had significant support from a number of members and I'm just conscious that that should have some bearing. I'm going to leave it there, but I would just perhaps say that I fully support your proposal that more business work should be done by the officers to actually develop a more detailed study of the request. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Musgrave. And I would stress again in saying that and in perhaps suggesting that we should have a further look, not in any way saying that the proposal that's on the table isn't one that we could support, because I think it is. I think we just need to be data led, but we do need to be quick and not just be sat here talking. Councillor Sellis.
Thank you. We've got the Safer Devon partnership as well. Is that the same as the Community Safety Partnership? Because the Safer Devon partnership is it supports very similar issues and you know, the most vulnerable in the community. And it's, you know, where we can effectively work together and make Devon feel even safer. And, you know, following on from what Councillor Pearce was saying, I think you raise some valid points. I think everyone that's spoken has, but we as a council need to be really adept at sharing any funding streams that are on offer, I would suggest. So I make no apology that I do send information off to all members, and I say, you know, bin it if, and I apologise if you've already received information. But there's quite a lot of funding streams out there, and I would also add that I've seen firsthand where the Youth Cafe has benefited from monies which I've been able to grant through the locality budget from Devon County Council. But I would also add that there are many number of very good groups that are doing excellent stuff as well. So I'm more minded to support what Councillor Edmonds has said, insofar as we need to find out where the safety partnership, community safety partnership, really want their money. And I also want some clarification on the Devon safety partnership. So I'm sorry about that. I've put a sort of spanner in the works, but there's quite a lot of things out there with very similar views and aims and ambitions.
Thank you, Councillor. That's noted. Can I bring in Councillor Ewing? So you had a point of order you have raised.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jury. Good afternoon, members. I was just going to say that to answer Councillor Sellis's point, the Devon Safer Partnership is usually chaired by the Cabinet Member for Communities, etc., which used to be Roger Crode, and I'm not sure if it is still Councillor Crode, but he chaired it for many years. The chairs of the Community Safety Partnership, the local Community Safety Partnership, so that's to do with authorities, etc., they come under the Devon Safer Partnership. The funding that is looked at overall is what Devon Safer Partnership can then allocate to major projects within a community safety family. So that's where they fit into it. And within the Devon Safer Partnership meetings, you have basically, it's only police superintendents for each area. You have the senior fire officers, drugs and alcohol team, etc. So it's a very high level strategic group, the Devon Safer Partnership, that feeds down into the Community Safety Partnership. And I hope that helps members with that.
Thank you, Councillor Ewings.
That's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Ewings. Mr. Hawke, he wanted to come in with a comment, I think.
Thank you, Leader. I was going to respond to Councillor Sellis, but Councillor Ewings has responded on that point. But I think just to echo what Councillor Sellis has said, I mean, if we were to go back to the CSP and carry out some further work, we can do that quickly and ensure that we are engaging with the voluntary sector and the various organisations. Because I think the week before last, we heard from some groups in the voluntary sector in West Devon doing outstanding work in supporting our young people. So it's just to make sure those wider conversations are happening so that the data can support the business case. So we could absolutely do that piece of work quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Hawke. Janice, did you have a comment as well? Is that now dropped off? Okay. Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. I want to support Councillor Pearce in this. I really agree with him that the CSP support the most vulnerable groups of young people in our society, those that are vulnerable to mental health issues, drug and crime, as we've heard, and it's really important work. And as we know, young people are the ones that have suffered the most, or one of the groups that have suffered the most during the COVID crisis, because of loss of education, loss of sport, loss of social contact and peer group support, and they are our future. So I would really like to see us supporting the CSP to continue their good work and perhaps take on extra work, because there's going to be extra work after the COVID crisis is finished and young people come back into society. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daniel. Recognise your comments, and yes, it is an organisation that really deserves our support and an area that we really want to support. I think what we're doing is just making sure that we're driven by the data and that we try and get help to those young people that need it right across the borough. So that's what is driving the proposal, I believe. Councillor Spettigue.
Thank you, Leader. Much of what I wanted to say has already been said by a number of my colleagues, so I'll just very quickly summarise. I think Councillor Edmonds' idea of extra funding for sport and recreation in the wake of COVID is a great idea. My personal feeling is that on the basis that the CSP have made a business case for an amount of money and justified how they'd spend it, that perhaps bringing forward something separately which provides funding for supporting sport and recreation in the post-COVID era might be a good thing to do, because then the CSP will have all the money that they've justified that they need. Yes, so really Councillor Pearce, Councillor Musgrave and Councillor Wood, Councillor Daniels have summed up my feelings.
Thank you, Councillor Spettigue. Comments are noted. Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Chair. I think, and my apologies, Councillor Edmonds, if I'm putting words into your mouth, I think both of our concerns are primarily that the proposal put forward, or the business case put forward, seems to be very Tavistock centric without any evidence or any discussion on how they're going to extend that into the wider borough. And that would be my primary concern, is that it has to reach the wider borough, and that's not detailed in there. And I think that would be the motivation behind Councillor Edmonds' proposal. So again, my apologies, Councillor Edmonds, if I've surmised that incorrectly. It isn't to take away from the work that the CSP do. I think we're all in agreement that they do a marvellous job, and they do fantastic work behind the scenes that many of us aren't aware of, even though we do attend their presentations. That would be my concern. So I'm happy that they undertake further research, but also to explain how it's going to reach the wider borough if the money is just going to those two particular groups for this funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. I agree with that. Councillor Edmonds.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Mott. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. That is very much in my thinking. I have no desire to hinder the progress of the CSB business case. I think I said in my opening remarks that I was very supportive of the good work that I know they do, and I have sat in during my time as a councillor on a number of their briefings, so I know from first-hand experience the excellent work that they do. I have every intention of supporting them. I'm not aware that we've agreed any sums. This is simply a figure that they have put forward. I think perhaps in the minds of some of us that figure was perhaps more than we originally perhaps had in mind. I don't know. Certainly more than I thought. And I'm simply trying to make sure that our support is proportionate across the borough. And as Councillor Mott correctly says, if my suggestion is not relevant, and I would accept that, then I would need to be fully satisfied that the CSP project will include all areas of the borough. And when I see mention of Tavistock Youth Cafe and so on, then I have to question whether that will be the case. So as part of this additional research, perhaps that's something that will come forward. So I stress, I have no wish to hinder the progress of this. Help is needed. I simply wish to ensure that help, as I said, is proportionate and we don't miss an opportunity to go beyond the case that is in front of us. And I have no desire to detract from the fine work of the CSP. And that is really the reason I brought it forward. I'm simply flying the flag for the more rural parts of the borough, which maybe we don't always hear enough about. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I just wanted to come back and to reassure Councillor Edmonds that the Tavistock Youth Cafe is just not Tavistock centric. There are youngsters in the past who have been helped from outside rural areas, outside of Tavistock. So I think, if clearly we need a lot more information on this subject so that members can be fully assured that what they are asking for is meeting the needs of the rural areas as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your debate, members. I think the thing that's coming out of this is that I think it's really important for us to find the right activities to support across the borough that are going to have maximum effect, and not necessarily get tied to one organisation. That organisation may be the means of driving it forward. Councillor Ewings.
Thank you, Leader. As members will see, I've actually declared an interest for Janice to note that I am the chairman of Tavistock Youth Cafe and have been for many years, and have been with the Tavistock Youth Cafe since its inception in Tavistock. The youth cafes for Oakhampton and Tavistock actually encompass the whole borough, they have always operated on that basis. Tavistock used to go out as far as Merrytavy. It goes as far as the Beer Peninsula. There's a very strong link with the Beer Peninsula, with Beer Olston's, I can't think what they call their youth cafe, but it's a very similar. And Vicky Lloyd Walsh, who is our manager, was the manager in the Beer Peninsula for a long time. She has recently left that role because the Tavistock Youth Cafe has been awarded a large sum of money to carry out mental health work on behalf of the Abbey Surgery in Tavistock, which covers a very large area. We are covering young people's mental health for them, as they don't have the requisite skills in their view to be able to carry out the work effectively that we have within our team. Through having that money, we've been able to employ a couple of extra people to actually look after the mental health of our young people. They have been met during these lockdowns via Zoom and one-to-one in quite a lot of cases. There is work that goes on remotely in that the staff and team do go out through the parks and things like that in the evenings to check up on young people, to see that they're okay, they're safe, they are aware of social distancing, what they've got to do, understanding their frustrations, etc. Because at this time, there are not many places for them to safely go to. And I think that is what a lot of this is about. It's they can't go into youth cafes, they can't go into buildings where they would normally congregate under a supervised manner. So, you know, parks, any small bit of wall that's got a roof over it or anything like that has become congregation points. That doesn't mean they're necessarily safe. So I'm just reassuring that Caroline Down, who leads with the Oakhampton team, who has also been a youth worker for well over 10 years, and I've known her for many years, she now runs Oakhampton and the surrounding area that way. So although it says Tavistock and Oakhampton, it doesn't mean those two towns. They do cover the surrounding areas, and they go up in blocks like the Community Safety Partnership to the Devon Safe funding. There's the West Devon area, and then you go into the Devon area for how the clubs, groups, whatever, access their funding through that. So it does tend to cover all of West Devon in this case, and our rural villages. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Ewings. Okay, I think we've had a really good debate on this topic. There is an amended wording which is being suggested, which is on your screens now. I'm happy to withdraw the original proposal and substitute that proposal, namely to request that officers undertake further research before a final decision is taken for additional funding to be allocated to the Community Safety Partnership, with this research being reported back to members as soon as is practically possible. Can I have a seconder for that amended proposal, please?
Happy to second.
Yeah, happy to second.
Thank you. I think Councillor Leach got in first there. Thank you. Janice, I think in the same spirit, we'll take a vote on this one as it's part of the budget process.
Thank you, Chair. So on recommendation 6 of item 7, Councillor Cheadle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
4.
Councillor Jory.
4.
Councillor Leach.
4.
Councillor Moody.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mort.
4.
Councillor Pearce.
4.
Councillor Lewis. Sorry, Samuel.
Yes, 4.
Thank you. And Councillor Sellis.
4.
Thank you. That is the amended recommendation 6 is carried unanimously.
Thank you, members. If we could move on to item 8 in your papers, the capital budget proposals for 2021-2022. Again, you have the papers in front of you. The papers recommend to Council that a programme totalling 1.075 million be implemented and demonstrates how that programme will be funded. A major part of that figure relates to public sector renewals, including disabled facility grants, and I know that our team does a great job in getting those out to where they're needed. It also includes £100,000 in respect of replacement payroll and HR software and replacement of IT hardware, both of these programmes being shared 50-50 with South Hams. The contents of the paper are in front of you, and I'd take any questions on that at this stage, members. Are there any questions? Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Chair. Just really for my own satisfaction, normally when we split the costs between ourselves and South Hams, the split is 60-40. Is there any particular reason why this one's gone 50-50? Not that I hasten to add, please, that I have an issue with that. It was just really for my own satisfaction. Thank you.
Yes, I'm not sure if there's an answer. If I know the answer to that, I wonder whether either Councillor Edmonds or Mrs. Buckle is able to answer that point specifically.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm happy to answer that question. For much of our IT software and hardware, in the past we have split that 50-50. The areas where we tend to split it more 60-40 is where it's caseload led, so things like housing benefits. But if it's pieces of IT software that are going to be of benefit to both councils, then in the main, we have split those 50-50 in the past, and that's the recommendation to do the same for these pieces of software. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think in accounting terms that there's certainly a case for that, and it does make sense to me. So I hope that's okay, Councillor Mott. Councillor Daniel, is your hand up a residual hand, or do you have a question on this particular topic?
Sorry, residual hand.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, members? Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I've got a question. I'm struggling a bit with the IT, so can't get to the annex that I would like to have got to. But a quick question, if I could, for Lisa, on the public sector renewals element of the paper, the budget of 860,000. Do we have a good record of spending the money that we're allocated?
Yes, we do, very much so. And in the past, we've actually benefited from higher allocations. So as we've moved through the financial year, because we've been able to spend our allocations of the Disabled Facilities grants, we have actually been able to get a higher allocation of the whole Devon-wide pot. So in this financial year, I think on the next report, in terms of the Capital Programme Monitoring Report, we are slightly behind where we would normally be in terms of spending our DFG money from the Better Care Fund, but I think that's the position across Devon, and that's mainly because in those very early months we weren't able to go out and do those sort of home visits. But in the main, we have a very good track record of spending that. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, thanks for that. That was the genesis of my question, really, was whether COVID or the implications of COVID is going to get in the way of us being able to, in a sense, pass that money through our hands and into the place where it can do the good.
I think it only did in the very early months. I don't think it's having an impact now. And we are trying to sort of catch up on many of those cases, but that would be the case across Devon, and that's not funding that we have to hand back to government. So if we don't spend that, we can carry it forward into the next financial year. So there is a chance to catch up as well.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Buckle. Any other questions, members, on the capital budget proposals? In which case, I'd like to propose the recommendations. There's two recommendations. They're on page 59, and I will take them en bloc. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you. And again, Janice, it's a budget proposal. Oh, sorry, we're moving to debate. Any debate on these items, members? We've got nothing coming forward, so we'll move to a vote. And Janice, if you could record the vote again, as it's a budget proposal.
Thank you, Leader. Can you let me know how you're voting, please? Councillor Cheadle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Jory.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Leach.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Moody.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mott.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Samuel.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Sellis?
4.
Thank you. Leader, they have been passed unanimously.
Thank you. If you could then move to item 9 on your agenda papers, which is the capital monitoring report for 2021. And this report is going to be introduced by Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. The report provides an update on the capital programme as at the 30th of November 2020. You'll have noted all capital projects are within the individual capital budgets approved by members. The capital programme is currently underspent, due mainly to the capital schemes for the Tavistock temporary accommodation development and the community housing schemes being in the early stages. The report and Appendix B provide an update on each of the capital projects, and I think these are self-explanatory. Appendix A sets out the details of the capital budget, including the amount spent to date. Both appendices contain restricted information and are therefore Part 2 items. And for the first time in this report, a list of Section 106 deposits is shown in Appendix C, so that members are aware of funds received, for example, for affordable housing and open space and recreation. The list includes the date funds were received and an expiry date, typically 10 years from the date of receipt of funds. South Hams have reported this information to members historically, so this brings us into line with that practice. A training session on Section 106 funds or agreements is to be arranged for members in the near future. And finally, Chair, the report recommendation is that the Hub Committee resolves to endorse the contents of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Members, any questions on this particular report? Councillor Cheadle.
Yeah, thank you. I very much welcome the new edition of the table of S106 information at Appendix C. I had one question. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4th column along is restriction committed end date. Some of the end dates are actually quite close. I need to be, if I read this table correctly, some of the 106 contributions need to be committed within the next couple of years. I just wonder if anyone's able to give an explanation of whether the date given is the date at which the said project should start, or the said project should finish or be partway through. I mean, this would have come out at the training session had we had it, I know, but that's been delayed.
I'm happy to answer that question, Leader.
Thank you, Mrs. Buckle.
Yes, thank you. So the date of the restriction is the date that the Section 106 money has to be spent. So, for example, on the first line, the one that says Tavistock Hockey Club, it's 10 years from the date of receipt, the date that we received the money. So we received the money in October 13. So we would have until October 2023 in which to spend that money. So that's the date the money has to be paid out of our ledger as such. So all of these Section 106 grants are monitored. We have a Section 106 officer who liaises with the relevant leads in affordable housing or open space in terms of the money that we have and the dates that money has to be spent by. We've never been in a position yet of having to repay a Section 106. So these are very closely monitored, but the third column or fourth column in the restrictions end date, that is 10 years or 5 years, depending on the Section 106 condition, from the date that we actually received the money. That's the trigger date, if you like.
Thanks very much. I mean, the point I think I'm making is that some of these projects are reasonably close to the point at which we should know precisely what's going to happen, how much it's going to cost, and be in a sense prepared to make the payment.
Yes, I think we have either Alex Rehag or Cassandra from our affordable housing team hopefully on the call today. I don't know if there's anything they wish to add with regards to the affordable housing projects that are listed.
Do you want me to just come in about some of the affordable housing projects that with the money that we've collected? So we have plans to spend some of that money. Obviously, Lisa's mentioned about a training session for members, and I think there's a different way that we would like to propose doing this, which follows the same process that we do in South Hams. So that would be letting members know when we receive that money to start thinking about what they'd like to spend that on, if there's any projects coming forward. So I think that's probably one for the future, but there is plans for some of this money so far. Does that help?
Yeah, I think what I'm really asking for is the training session, but where we can go through this table with some practical examples. But I'm reassured by Mrs. Buckle that there doesn't appear to be a case of us having to hand this money back because we failed to make the due date.
We can certainly give you some working examples when we do the training sessions, if that's what we want to do.
I think that'd be helpful. Yeah, thank you.
And Chair, perhaps I can just come in there. I mean, as I mentioned, you know, the thinking behind this is, as Councillor Cheadle has already picked up, to increase member awareness of these deposits and the approaching date. So, as Councillor Cheadle has done today, to question and to raise questions to see where we are with these projects, and perhaps to influence within the ward or whatever it takes to make sure we get these projects across the line, to make sure that we do spend this money, and I think that's very much the thinking behind this report, so that members are really aware of Section 106 monies that's available within their ward, and to keep a watchful eye on those end dates.
Thank you, Mr. Buckle, and thank you, Councillor Edmonds. That's helpful. Sorry, Mrs. Buckle.
Sorry, Leader. We could also bring, after the training, we could bring a report back to members around Section 106 is due to be spent, say, in the next 2 to 3 years, so that members then can tie that up with this schedule, and have confidence over the projects that are coming forward for those Section 106s to be spent.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds as though it would be really helpful. Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Chair. I think Mrs. Buckle has actually just answered my next suggestion, is that perhaps either, not necessarily on the chart that we have in front of us, because it's going to get very busy otherwise, that perhaps accompanying this report when we get them in future, that they could come with a report to state how the money is being spent and what it's going on, and the progress that's being made on the money and where it's gone on. And I would thank Councillor Edmonds for including this. I've spent many years trying to chase up where we are with 106 monies, and it is a very complicated thing to keep an eye on and to grasp. So I'm glad that that is now being spread amongst the wider membership so that everybody's aware of it.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. Councillor Sellis.
Thank you, Leader. I welcome this. Devon County Council has responsibility, as we know, for education and transport as well. And I think if members know that officers at Devon County Council are looking at this closely, as a matter of course, it's in their day job, I think members will be reassured to know that I've received many inquiries about the Devon County Council side of it, and I hope this, just for clarification, Lisa, that will be included in the training, I hope. Lisa,
Yes, we can. Sorry, yes,
Yeah.
we can ensure that's included. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thanks, because you know, quite rightly, people are asking, and that's great. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sellis. And I think just to reiterate that point, we've had a couple of meetings recently with officers at Devon County on some issues, education in particular, and I'm really reassured as to just how on the ball they are with these things and the forecasts that are taking place. Councillor Pearce.
Thanks, Leader. I just wanted to reassure members that where we have 106 money for community facilities and sports clubs, we have some applications coming forward, but we made a significant allocation to Tavistock Rugby Club in the last autumn, whereby it enabled them to buy the land which their training pitches are on. So the 106 money is being used, and as Lisa said, or Mrs. Buckle said, sorry, you know, we haven't had to pay back any 106 money that I can remember in the time that I've been a West Devon Borough Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. I've got no more questions coming forward at this point, so perhaps I could ask Councillor Edmonds if you would like to propose the recommendation.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I move the recommendation on page 69 of your agenda papers, which asks members to endorse the contents of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have a seconder, please?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. Members, any debate on this report? I've got no indication of any wish to debate, so we'll move to a vote. And Janice, if you could record the vote on this one, please.
Thank you, Leader. Could I take how you're voting, please, on the endorsement of the contents of this report? Councillor Cheadle.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jory.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Leach.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Moody.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mott.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Samuel. Councillor Samuel. I'll come back. And Councillor Sellis.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Samuel. Looks like we may have lost Councillor Samuel. Oh no, Councillor
Sorry,
Samuel.
I'm back. Yes, I'm back.
Well done.
For me.
Thank you. That is carried unanimously, Leader.
Thank you, members. If we could move to item 10 on your agenda, which is Devon District Procurement Strategy. You have a paper in front of you, to which attached is the documentation regarding the procurement strategy, and we're very lucky to have Rosie here online to help us with any questions on this one. There are a number of recommendations. I particularly like you to note that one of the recommendations asked us to consider any West Devon specific priorities or objectives which should be explored. So if there are any, I'd be interested in hearing those come forward. So do we have any questions on the procurement strategy documentation? Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to show that I do read these documents. It appears to me in some of the attached or supporting documentation, so the information that starts on page 89, column 1, 2, 3, column 4, it appears that some of the information is missing. It seems that in some places the sentence finishes mid-stride. Are we able to get the rest of that? Is it relevant? I was just curious, please.
Yes, I noticed that I was informed this morning, so I do apologise for that. And I don't believe it will affect your decision today, but I can get that updated for the public.
Thank you. I didn't doubt that it was missing anything specific that would affect the decision today. I was just curious. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do have some questions. I think I'm referring here, first of all, to the procurement strategy document. And it says there, although this strategy is specific to the district authorities, they will continue to work collaboratively with other members of the Devon and Cornwall procurement partnership to maximise the benefits of all partners' spend with external suppliers. So my first question is, does this include joint procurement with our Cornish friends over the border? And secondly, coming back over the border, do we work with Devon County Council on joint procurement strategies and indeed procurement? And if not, could this be considered as an objective, as we're invited to do, as you've just mentioned, Chair? That's my first question, if you wish perhaps to deal with that one at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Rosie, do you have any comments that you can update us on, particularly in terms of collaboration with Cornwall Council?
Yes, so in terms of Cornwall Council, I believe we've added in the strategy that we will consider a radius rather than segregating it by districts, so that we don't leave out our neighbours in Cornwall. And in terms of the second element to your question, Devon County Council and Plymouth City Council were, they were invited, but they weren't included in this. But we do have aspects of procurements where we do collaborate with Devon County Council, such as stationery. There are opportunities in the future for energy, so electricity and gas to collaborate with them. So that there are opportunities. There are current procurements going on. And in the future, we do hope to work with Devon County more.
Thank you, Rosie. I think that could then be taken as one of our specific priorities or objectives. And I'd probably add to that the fact that we work very closely with Plymouth City Council within the JLP, that it would be good to work with them on perhaps on some procurement contracts as well, if we can.
Yes, Plymouth lead on the stationery contract, so that's a very big contract that we work with Plymouth.
Excellent. Well, does that help, Councillor Edmonds? Does that answer your question?
Enormously, and I'm really pleased to hear that that we're involved in that, and we're able to procure on a joint basis, and I'm sure that results in being able to negotiate favourable purchase terms. May I move on to my second question, Leader, which is, I'm not sure which document this is in, forgive me. I think this is probably in the review document. And I've noted there that West Devon local spend in 2018-19 was 2% out of our total spend. But I note that Torridge, for example, spent 39% locally. So the question is, can we reasonably aim to achieve perhaps the Torridge spend of 39%? And again, could we set this as objective? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. And I think the intention is clearly to increase our local spend. I'm very much in favour of trying to promote a more circular economy locally, and on things like the Preston model, on which I think this documentation is based. And certainly one of the discussions that we've had around this procurement strategy is that officers should go away and look at what is feasible to spend locally, and set ourselves perhaps some stretch targets in order to get to that point. Rosie, do you have anything to add on that point?
Councillor Drury, you put it in a nutshell, really. The only thing I would add is that, yes, we are going to we are going to work with the officers. I think we're going to contact the managers first and see whether there are any quick wins, whereby we could possibly, whether there's contracts expiring where we can give opportunities to the local supply base, and there are other elements such as, do we need this, and if not, is there a termination for convenience clause? Can we bring the opportunity again back to being local? So those are the current thoughts, and we will work on boosting that local spend.
Thank you. Does that help, Councillor Edmonds?
Yeah, it does very much so. Thank you. And I think I raised this in a briefing, and I believe that Rosie may possibly have done some work on this. So I think it's only fair that I come back to the point. But our total spend in 18-19 was 7.2 million. So I raised the question: is it possible to break that figure down into, say, the top categories, 5 categories, for example, expenditure? With perhaps a view, to obviously spend as much of that as we can locally, but also perhaps, is there opportunity to, again, negotiate more favourable purchase terms, working perhaps collaboratively, in order to get a more favourable purchase price? And if my maths are correct, just a 5% reduction in our purchase costs equates to a saving of £350,000. For West Devon. So that's my train of thought around that, but I'm not sure whether Rosie has got any information regarding our top spends. Thank you.
Yes, I can certainly get that for you, and I'll work with my manager, Mr. Hawke, and make sure that we've got all the data in place to share with you all. That will be fine.
Thank you, Mr. Hawke.
I hope I'm not creating too much additional work for you.
Thank you, Mr.
Hawke.
No,
that's absolutely fine.
Sorry.
Thanks. Yes, just to add to what Rosie was saying, I propose, Councillor Edmonds, that Rosie carries out that piece of work with the support of the extended leadership team, and we bring it back to the Financial Stability Review Group within the next few months.
That would be excellent. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I think that would be really useful. And of course, it is the other side of the equation, that it's all very well committing to spend money locally, but we also have to be cost effective and make sure that we're getting paying a fair price for what we get as well. So it does need to be weighed up. Councillor Cheadle, you have a question.
Thank you. Well, you've almost asked it on my behalf with your last comment, but it's a sort of an impossible question, but I'll give it a go. In the implications part of this paper, the financial implications, it does say that there's a possibility of an increase in costs depending on the weight we put on, for example, environmental sort of concerns, climate change type things. And also, I would argue our requirement to be local. I mean, if we're buying widgets and we can get widgets from Yorkshire for 3p, but they cost 6p here, how do we go about the process of saying, well, actually, it's worth us paying the extra for getting them locally? Is there a process, or is it just sort of some intuitive feeling at the time?
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. Is that something that has been touched on, Rosie, in research such as the into the Preston model, for example?
It's a very good question. When we did some research into the Preston model, there were no real variances. There was no correlation between the price that a supplier will offer and the amount of social value that they will give. It was all variable when you look at the graph. However, if you did want, if a supplier for example, a local supplier were to offer a higher price, but you were happy to pay that higher price, then it would be based on how you engineered your tender. So, for example, we're suggesting 5 or 10% on your social value element, which will include the local element. If you weren't too concerned with the price, then you can boost that percentage up, and then decrease the price percentage in your ratio. However, we've just got to play a really careful balancing act, because we're in a situation, COVID times, where we really need to be careful with our budgets, and I believe the price element will still play a really big part. Quality is important, social value is important, but I think price, especially during these times, is just as important too.
So if I could just come back on that, we sort of set in the tendering process, we set an element for local supply, if I can put it that way, or compliance with climate change. And what you're suggesting is, at the moment, in the times we're in at the moment, that ratio is relatively small, and were we to be in more fortunate financial circumstances, we would be able to tweak that element up, should we wish to.
Should we wish to? Yes. I mean, we've started at the baseline of with this joint strategy. We've started at the baseline of including 5 to 10% for your social value elements and your sustainability elements, and I recommend that we start with that, and we'll review it on a continuing basis. But in terms of benchmarking nationally, that's generally what procurement departments across the country are doing. It would be your price, which is usually around 60%, and then you'd have the quality, which is around 30%, and then you'd have your 10% for your sustainable procurement. So that will include your environmental element and your social value.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel. Councillor Daniel, are you still there?
Can you hear me? Yes,
Yep.
Thank you. I think most of what I wanted to ask has been just answered, but I just want to say it's good to see that you're aiming to get sustainable procurement, and I really want to know how you're going to monitor this. What considerations are you going to take to make sure that this happens, and not just look at the cost of things, but look at the cost of things like transport, environmental emissions, extra packaging, and the cost, as you say, the social costs of not using local providers. And are these considerations always explicit when you make your decisions?
It's generally how we set out the tender. So in terms of sustainable procurement, we might state what is your environmental or sustainable policy. In terms of social value, we might ask, do you have any apprenticeship schemes, or how will you benefit the local economy? And in terms of reviewing that, it will be a case of creating some sort of, well, I'm working on a spreadsheet whereby every tender that's awarded, I can analyze the supplier and see what questions we've asked, what weighting we put towards sustainable procurement or social value, and then I'm hoping that in a year's time I'll have a really good snapshot, because that's something that we've already been doing with the sustainable procurement policy that we released last year, and I can build on that now and really get into the nitty-gritty of reviewing what suppliers we've awarded.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Leader. Just a comment perhaps to add to what Rosie's just said. One of the key parts of the work that Adam's doing with respect to climate change and biodiversity relates to our Scope 3 emissions. And that's our emission, the emissions that come from our purchasing of goods and services. And it makes up the main part of our actual carbon footprint. So aligning our procurement and understanding the change in those Scope 3 emissions will be really important. It's a big piece of work, it's difficult, but we are going to try and align the procurement and the measurement of those Scope 3 emissions as we go forward. So there isn't a simple answer to any of this. And generally, if you go down a 100% sustainable route, then the cost will go up. So it is getting that fine balance. But are joining up together to try and achieve that sort of outcome. So I hope that helps.
Could I possibly add one final point, Chairman?
Please do.
Also, I just wanted to say that now that Brexit has happened, we are still bound by the Public Contracts Regulations of 2015, which is based on the EU procurement principles. The only difference at the moment is that we're advertising in a different place. So we're advertising purely in the UK now rather than the EU. However, a green paper has been released. It's all public and you can see it. That is a consultation on the new contracts regulations, which we will be following in the future. There's no date yet when these will be released, but it's looking earliest January 2022 or later. And I think that these will really help us achieve our goals as well, because dependent on how the regulations will be formulated, it appears that there will be more focus on buying locally, which will help.
Great, thank you, Rosanna. I've got no other questions coming forward, so I'm going to move forward and propose the 3 recommendations under this item. They're as shown on page 83 of your agenda papers, and we'll take them on block. So I'd like to propose those, please. Could I have a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. If we could move into debate then, members. Any debate on this particular item? Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm heartened to hear that sensible consideration will be given of local suppliers. I just am somewhat alarmed at Rose's comments about, because of the COVID-19 situation, that we will have to go for the or the indication was given that we'll have to go to the cheapest quotes possible, because that doesn't always bode well. The cheapest isn't always best, and I think, I'm really pleased that we are looking at supporting our local companies and businesses, because it's very important. It's no good saving 5% on something and then finding that 2 of our local companies closed down, and they could have, would have stayed open had we given them some of the business. So, it's quite a broad spectrum we've got to look at here, and I thank her for the work that she has done. It really is, quite substantial, but we've got a way to go yet. But it's very important that the message is put out that we are up for supporting our local companies and local businesses. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. I very much agree with that. And I think though, one of the things that Rosie was putting forward, and this certainly stems out of the Preston model, is that there are a number of measures, and it's not just the bottom line, the cheapest, that is the one that we ought to necessarily consider. Councillor Sellis.
Thank you. Yeah, I welcome this, and I think many members and the community have commented about unitary, and I'm convinced that with Team Devon and how we've been working more closely, especially with the pandemic, that this gives us an excellent opportunity to secure better, closer shared working. And so if ever the issue of unitary is raised, hopefully we'll be able to evidence base that by Devon working together, we're actually making significant savings with procurement, for example, and that that will negate any need to spend lots of money on possibly going unitary, and also negate the need and encourage more local representation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sellis. It's a separate debate perhaps, but I'm yet to be convinced that unitary in Devon would save money, and in terms of political representation, local representation, and inefficiencies, I think it could end up being the worst decision. I agree with you entirely that working with Team Devon has probably served us very well during the recent problems we've had, and will serve us very well in moving forward and becoming more efficient.
Yeah, agreed.
Councillor Leach.
Yes, I'd just like to say I'm also heartened, but that's mainly because we don't have to tender through Europe. That's a given for me. But I also assume that MEAT, MEAT, the most economic and advantageous tender, is still on within the documentation. That means you don't have to take the cheapest quote you get for the ones that are a benefit to us.
Thank you, Councillor Leach. I think that message is coming forward loud and clear, and I think is implicit in the proposal. So we'll make sure that that does get included. I think as a West Devon specific objective within this proposal. So I'm getting no further debate coming forward. I'm happy to take this to a vote, and if it's okay with you, Janice, we'll do this by exception.
Thank you.
So if anybody would like to indicate if they are not in favour or if they're likely to abstain. I'm getting nothing coming forward, so I will take that as being a vote in favour of the recommendations. Thank you, members. If we can then move on to the next item on the agenda, which is minutes of other bodies. You have in front of you the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and a recommendation that came from that committee that the Hub Committee be recommended to adopt the revised safeguarding policy. You've been provided with a copy of the safeguarding policy, and I think a separate link to it by email as well. Members, are there any questions about the adoption of the revised safeguarding policy? I'm getting no questions coming forward. I guess it's pretty clear. So that being the case, I'd like to move the proposal that is shown you on a screen in front of you, that the Hub Committee be recommended to adopt the revised safeguarding policy as attached at Appendix A of the presented agenda report. Could I have a seconder for that proposal, please?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Leach. Members, any debate? Thank you. This, of course, already has been through some debate at O&S and elsewhere. So I'm happy on that basis to move to a vote in favour of the proposal. Again, I think we'll take this by exception, if that's okay, Janice. So would members like to indicate if they would like to vote against this proposal or abstain? I have nothing coming forward, so we'll take that as an agreement, Janice. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader.
So, members, that's all I have now on my agenda. So, thank you very much for your attendance today, for a robust and very interesting debate, and I will see you all soon. So thank you very much. Meeting closed.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader.
Thanks, everyone.